Welcome to the Art of Faith podcast. I'm Joshua Kapczynski, and this podcast is produced by Granite Creek Studios. We would welcome and encourage your support. That way we can keep this podcast going. Thank you for joining us for today. We are in a series called Who is Jordan Peterson? I'm a fan, but not only am I just a fan, the more that I listen to him, the more that I read his books, I am finding that not only is he important to the popular discussion or the public forum, he's really important for the church. And after rereading today's chapter, I'm even more convinced that he's a follower of Christ, or he has a relationship with God. So this is really exciting for me. This is The Art of Faith, Who is Jordan Peterson, and this is 12 Rules for Life Beyond Chaos, or Overcoming Chaos. Rule number 2. Rule number 2, like, this one is such a big deal. This one's a huge deal for people of faith. In many ways, it's almost even non-response. It's like I don't even feel like I have the ability to cover this chapter and to do it justice. But the chapter is entitled, "Treat yourself like someone you are responsible for helping." All right, so just think about that for a second. Treat yourself like someone whom you are responsible for helping. That might give you a little moment, a little time for pause and reflect, and you might be thinking to yourself, "Oh, that's kind of big, that's kind of heavy, but that makes sense." So yeah, that makes sense. Here is one of the types of illustrations that Jordan Peterson will give. He will say, and forgive me for my French, but in chapter 2 of this book, he will say, "Take your damn medicine." And he has he's got data, he's got numbers about how many Americans are prescribed medication that will help them, and they don't take not only do they don't take it, they don't go ahead and fill the prescription. And the ones that do go to the doctor says you need to take this pill or you're going to die of a heart attack, or you're going to have high blood pressure, yada yada. The ones that do go to the doctor, fill the prescription, a majority of those, I think it's like 80%, don't take the medication when they're supposed to. They forget to take it. They think that they don't need to take it. And so there's this huge issue of Americans not wanting to take care of themselves. And I think that we can all, probably relate to that. I know that I can. I don't like taking my medication. I've got high triglycerides, and I don't want to take medication. I don't like taking pills. Occasionally, I have high blood pressure. I don't like taking that stuff either. But I do, because I just want to be healthy, and I want to make sure that my levels are exactly where they need to be as a person for my age. And so I've been more proactive. I've had a few scares, and so I've been more proactive on taking better care of myself, whether it is through pill form or through healthy lifestyle choices, which is probably preferable. Now, I think probably a majority of the skepticism towards doctors and towards medication is 100% justified in the whole COVID debacle. Like we just don't know what we're putting into our body because we're told to be putting into our body, and that's complicated things. That aside, regardless, we have this inability to want to take care of ourselves. Here's the illustration, and this is something that I can speak personally about. I have a bunch of animals living in my house. Let me see. I have 2 dogs, 3 cats, um, 2 possums that you're not supposed to know about, a bunch of fish. We had a bird that got away, but we have all these animals that are living in our house, and I'm okay with the cats, but I love our dogs. I'm like a full-on dog person, and previous dogs, one of them got really sick, ate a bunch of snail bait, like almost killed himself, and I rushed this dog to the hospital in the middle of the night. And so I'm, signing all this paperwork, paying a premium to save his life at, in the late hours. And we did it. And not only did we pay this, ridiculously high vet bill, we took him back to the vet, the next day, and then the next week, and then we gave him medication to help, get this toxins out of his system. And that was just one. That was just one case. There's, we've done other situations with our dogs where we've given them medication. One of our older dogs, he had some hip problems because he was hit by a car when he was a puppy. Like, we gave him pain medication, and I remember specifically comparing our vet bill with our medical bills. And so here's the truth. We were spending more money on our animals, on our pets, than we were spending on our own health. And it's not because of necessity. It's just because we just didn't want to take our own medication. We didn't want to go to the doctors. We didn't want to face the reality. We didn't want to take care of ourselves. So in many aspects, it was easier for us to take care of our animals than it was to take care of ourselves. And that is the hard truth. There's another illustration that Jordan Peterson doesn't bring up. I brought it up several times. I'm not quite sure where I got it. I know I ripped it off from somebody else. But if you're a parent traveling with your family in an airplane, and the warning light pops on, and the captain comes on the intercom and says, "We're experiencing some turbulence, and we might be going down." And so in those scary moments, there's like these compartments that open up above your head, and then these masks come down. And I don't know if you're familiar with what the instructions are, but the instructions are that you take the oxygen mask and you put it on yourself first before you put it on your child. And why it seems counterintuitive for us to do something like that. Why in the world would we want to put ourselves above our own children? Well, in that scenario, there's a risk of you passing out and then your kids passing out because you can't get the mask on them correctly. So we all understand that concept, and yet it is so hard for us to get. Now, this rule number 2, I think, is probably very applicable to our society, because I'll be the first to admit it. Like, I place my animals on a very high level of importance. Like, they're up there in my priority scale. Like, I love my animals. I love you guys too, but there's been many a day where I love my animals more than I love you. And and then there's many a day where I'm treating my animals better than I treat myself. And so this rule that Jordan Peterson lays out is treat yourself like someone you are responsible for helping. So it's not selfish to want to help yourself, to want to improve yourself, to want to make a better life for yourself. Now, this chapter, gosh, this is such a dang good chapter. It's more than just a self-help chapter. It really gets down to the root of the human condition, because we all know that we need to take better care of ourselves. We all know that that's a truth. But the big question is why? Why don't we treat ourselves better than we ought to? Why don't we practice self care? Why don't we take responsibility for our failings and our needs? Like, why don't we take care of ourselves the way, in the same level that we would take care of others? And Jordan's absolutely brilliant in this. And again, I am not placing him on a pedestal up there with Jesus, but in this scenario, he's pretty dang close because he's understanding the human condition and the human heart and the human frailty. And so the one reason why we do not treat ourselves like someone that we're responsible for helping is is because of the sin nature. He will rewind the clock all the way back to the Garden of Eden, and he's going to expose some of our frailties and primarily some of our insecurities as to why we do not treat ourselves as we should, is we don't treat ourselves as if we ourselves are made in the image of God. And so therefore we'll take care of our animals better than we'll take care of ourselves. So he begins to he kind of frames this chapter just like I did. And then he jumps into this philosophical, theological jumble that like you can't just skim over it. You can't listen to, if you're into audiobooks, which actually I prefer that you listen to this book in the audio version because he narrates it himself. It's narrated by the author. So I think it carries much more weight and much more power if you're listening to it in the audio version. But what he begins to unpack is actually the thesis of this whole book. He begins to talk about the dichotomy of order and chaos. So um, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this justice, but just go with me here. He will say that there are two major components to life, two major elements, if you will, that pull on us, that dictate our lives, elements that we must struggle with, balance, come into relationship. One is order. So we all know that we need to get our lives in order. We know that order is important. We know that God loves order. And so we need to embrace this power of order. So order. The second other side of the coin, the yin to the yang, if you will, is chaos. And chaos, being the opposite of order, is this, it's the dark feelings that you feel when you're alone, or you feel like there's a monster under your bed, or when people or situations hijack your life and throw your life into confusion. When you lose your job, when a romantic relationship doesn't work out, the one that you thought that would work out. When you get displaced, you get thrust into this category of chaos, and no one likes it. But yet at the same time, in the midst of chaos, there is an energizing factor. So the reason why we don't take care of ourselves, he's going to rewind the clock all the way back to the Garden of Eden, and he's going to highlight these two elements of chaos and order. All right, so this is what it looks like. in the garden, we've got basically in Genesis 1, Genesis 2, we have two creation accounts, and they're very similar. They've got some differences. One has been written a little bit older, the other one is a retelling of the story. And they're both very important about the creation of man and woman. In one account, it says that God created man and woman in his image, and in his image he created them. And so there is an equality that takes place. And then the other creation story of Adam and Eve, which you're familiar with, it God comes and says he creates Adam first out of the dirt, and he's like, oh man, it's not a good idea for you to be alone. And then he creates Eve out of his rib. So we got two almost seemingly contradicting creation accounts, but they're not, because they both make sense in the grand narrative. Now, we're all familiar with the Garden of Eden, which is the land that is well watered. The Garden of Eden is um, the way that the Hebrew describes the garden is that not only is it a garden that's well watered, but it's also a fenced off area. So it is a contained space that has fruit and that has everything that you need. And Adam and Eve were naked in this place, and it is just it's completely bliss. And this is also in an environment where Adam and Eve and God could walk together and then be in step with one another. And this is a beautiful picture of complete and beautiful order. Like, it is an ordered place. There's nothing out of place in the Garden of Eden. And yet, this is what we've got to struggle with. Like, I don't have the answers for this. And yet, in this perfect ordered garden, paradise, heaven on earth, the way that things should be, like, there's a snake there. So how did the snake get into this perfect place? How did this little tiny creature that is kind of sneaky and slithery, how does he enter into God's perfect plan and God's perfect order? And what does the snake represent? The snake represents chaos. And so we have, you know, in the midst of this perfect, walled off environment, we have a little drop of imperfection or a little drop of chaos, and represented, of course, by the snake. And if you're of the Christian perspective, that is the devil. So, order in an environmental sense, we did a series a while back on the art of J.R.R. Tolkien. Order is the Shire. Order is this idealistic, perfect little community where there's only happiness and nothing bad ever takes place. And Tolkien highlights this in a beautiful way with, framing out this beautiful little garden community called the Shire. And then he shows you the counter to it, which is, the dragon's evil lair, that deep underground into some cavernous dark cave where he's eaten all the dwarves and he's hoarding all their gold, and then again the chaos is represented. So that's where it all starts, and he begins to frame this out. Now, in the characters of Adam and Eve, he describes the fruit, which was the temptation, and God, this is harsh, but he does it. I would encourage you that you do follow and you read the book on this one. but Eve's the one that eats the fruit first. So she's the one that listens to the enemy of God. She's the one that listens to the serpent. She's the one that listens to the devil. And it's presented to her like, if you eat this, it is good, and you will become like God, and then you will know the difference between good and evil. And so like, if you eat this fruit, then you're going to be awakened. And the way that Jordan Peterson frames it as a psychologist is he says that when you eat this fruit, you will become conscious. You will become self-aware. And that's a huge idea. So what he's saying is that before the fall, before the temptation, Adam and Eve, they might have been conscious, but they might not have been self-aware. Why? Because they're just walking around naked all the time. They don't really care about what's exposed. And we know that he makes this important point that um, through, oh man, I'm gonna get in trouble for this, but for you know for the sake of evolution, we are different types of animals. Like, if you wanted to say that we've evolved from monkeys, you can say that, but we're different types of animals because we walk upright, and we have all of our vital organs exposed. So not even chimps do this. Chimps will they'll walk upright for the most part, but everything that they do is hunched over, and so all of their vital organs and their reproductive organs, like, they're all shielded by their back and by their hair. And so, even though technically, I guess, we're the closest relatives to chimpanzees, we're just completely different because we're 100% exposed. We walk upright. And so when Eve eats this fruit, she's aware of good and evil, but she also becomes self-aware that she is an exposed person. And then when she sees Adam, Jordan, this is so brutal, but it's so brilliant. Jordan makes this point to say that she is not going to put up with a person or a spouse that is not self-aware. And so she encourages him strongly to eat the fruit. And when he does, um, he this is really sad, but he blames her, and then he blames God. So, like, this woman gave me the fruit. This woman that you gave me made me eat it. And so, in many senses of this story, Adam is the weaker character because he is blame shifting, and Eve is the stronger character in that she is deceived by the very best. So she's deceived by the devil, and Adam's just making excuses and blaming God and blaming his wife. So it's a very fascinating story about the condition of relationships between males and females. So what in the world does that have to do by treating yourself like someone you are responsible for helping? It's because it gets down to the heart of the human condition, saying that we are all, whether we realize it or not, we're born with insecurities. We're born with a level of shame. We don't feel like we are worthy of God's love. We don't feel like we're worthy to be helped. And so, therefore, we will help others. Peter Scazzero came out with a very powerful statement that has helped me run my ministry. And that is, we need to be aware of people that will use God to run from God, meaning that they don't want to deal with their own stuff. And so, therefore, they'll focus their attentions on somebody else's stuff, or they'll focus their attentions on something else that looks spiritual rather than dealing with their own demons, or rather than helping to help themselves grow into maturity. And, well, I think it's fascinating. So, in short, um, how do we treat ourselves like somebody that we are responsible for helping? It would take a lot of hard soul searching. Like you really need to say, look, I need to work on myself. Do I, you know, like my wife and family and the people around me, like they all got problems of their own. But probably the better thing to do would be to try and have the Lord fix me, in essence, fix myself before I fix others. And that is such a huge thing. And that is a sign of maturity. That is a sign that not only are we becoming more and more self-aware, but we are becoming more and more self-responsible. And I think that is the theme of Jordan Peterson's thing. All right. I know I didn't really flesh out this dichotomy of chaos and order. Um, this theme will come back into our next sessions and some other rules that we'll be discussing. But I think we would all agree that we need a little order. We need more order in our life. But the question that Peterson also presents is you might need a little chaos in your life too. Now that is oh my gosh, that's a scary proposition. And this is the way that he says it that probably will help it make sense to all of us. One is that order is good, but if we push too far into order, then we will fall into the trap of bending the knee to tyranny, meaning that everything has to be ordered in its specific place. Everybody's got their place in society. Everybody's got their niche. Order gone to the extreme is what drove people into gulags and into concentration camps. Order perfected by humankind it's communism, which killed millions and millions of people because they had to maintain order and at all cost. And so chaos can be an antidote, according to Peterson, and I have to spend a little bit more time on this. But chaos can be an antidote to order gone wrong, meaning that chaos births something new and something fresh. And chaos is I know it seems like a negative, but chaos is the element that causes new life to grow, that causes you to maybe move into a new environment or a new city where God can truly prosper you and bless you. The prophet Isaiah, he had to experience chaos in the desert in order for him to move and step into God's calling. And so chaos can be a good thing. Order can be a good thing, but too much chaos can be clearly a dysfunctional thing, and too much order can clearly be a dangerous thing. So trying to find the balance of that in our own personal lives, trying to find a balance to this in our society, well, that's the big struggle. All right, I'm done for today. Thank you so much for watching or listening to the Faith podcast on Who is Jordan Peterson. We'll do rule number 3 next time. God bless you guys. Have a great week. Peace.